Thank you. Thank you. That's a great introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So I hope that today's presentation is something that is practical for everybody in the room. So I've done marketing for a long time, and many of the presentations that I attend tend to be a lot of theory, which is interesting and important and valuable, but I also want to try to make sure that everybody in the room today leaves with some things that they can try at their companies and do a little bit differently. So I find that to be a pretty helpful thing. I'm going to be talking about account-based marketing. I'm sure if you're in the marketing space, you hear a lot about it, and I'll talk why I think it's a valuable tactic to be looking at today. So specifically, hopefully this works, I'm going to focus on why in marketing you shouldn't just be looking at acquisition. So that's something, if many of you are in startups, growth is a big objective, and all of us hear about growing our business, and I'm going to talk about acquisition is really important, but you really want to think about quality acquisition, because it doesn't help you if you're bringing in a lot of leads per se, if they're churning out or you don't have the ability to upsell, cross-sell. I'm going to talk about why ABM is great for the entire journey. So I really like to think about, and this is really an important point for today, again, not just thinking about acquisition, but once people are customers, how do you keep them as customers and upsell, cross-sell them? How to think about programs, and then tips for measurement and optimization. And I'm going to go through really what I present at our board and some of the things that I found to be pretty helpful here. Hopefully this works. So today, this is where, how many of you are actually in marketing? I'm just curious. Okay, great. You'll relate to this. So often in marketing, you meet with your sales leader and they might tell you, hey, great, not enough of the right kind of leads. It's a volume problem. We just don't have enough. Or maybe you go to an event and you feel like everyone did a good job and you have 20,000 leads. I've done this. I've been to Dreamforce many years. And you feel, wow, we've done a good job. But they're like, the quality is terrible. These aren't converting. And that isn't fun to hear. And then what happens with that is you often will then have a poor relationship with your sales team. And if anyone can relate to that, that's just not a good, you don't want that, because it's poor efficiency. So it can be a tense relationship, but there's good reasons why that can happen, because your sales team needs to close deals. And then what can also happen is issues with churn and retention. So if you're only focused on big quantities of volume, you might not be bringing in the right folks, and then you have issues here. So many of these are problems that I'm sure folks in the room can relate to. I'm assuming yes. And so that's what we'll talk about today. So one of the things I think in marketing, especially over the last few years, we are probably pretty familiar with funnel models. Everybody's probably seen something like this. And I'm sure you have CEOs that tell you, okay, growth is really important, just get those numbers up. And you probably might see something like this where you talk about lead generation, you might have MQLs, marketing qualified leads, that you talk about. And you might think a lot about different tactics like trade shows, digital marketing, aspects to bring people in at the top of the funnel. And that kind of is exciting and feels good. But there's problems with this. It's broad-based. Again, this is an inbound model where you're not necessarily sure about the people that you're bringing into your business. And again, it's very lead-centric. Whoops. And then the goal is volume. And there's some real issues with that we'll talk about. So this is kind of the key thing that I want to highlight, is that in many cases, a lot of companies are very, to me, too focused on acquisition. If you go into an organization, you look at their marketing team, I actually see this all the time, where there's 10 marketers and they're all, hey, I'm in digital marketing, I'm growth marketing, and I'll say like, well, who's the person that's thinking about retention or upsell, cross-sell? And it's Timmy that's over in the corner, and it's like, wow, one person owns that, and it's probably your most valuable asset that you have. So in today's presentation, really, if you kind of remember one thing, growth is good. Everyone knows that, but think about quality growth, because it will not help your business if you're just bringing in a bunch of leads that ultimately churn out, or your sales team's like, I can't close those. It's just not going to be effective. Now, we'll talk about where ABM really plays a critical role in this. Let's see. But it's important to look at your customers, and this is what a lot of people don't do. They don't actually take a look at who they're closing to see which of the customers are not profitable for my business, which are some that are profitable, but which are my best customers. And I'm curious how many people in the room have done that exercise, where you could actually say, this is the best type of customer for our business. And it's a really important exercise to do. And I find that a lot of folks, especially at startups, they're just thinking about in marketing, okay, like, I want to make sure my website looks good, I want a good brand, and I really want to make sure we're growing, but they don't necessarily think about this exercise. So again, I think one of the key messages I want to highlight today is really thinking about what is the best type of customer for your business? And this is really thinking about your ideal customer profile. So you might hear the term ICP, and that's really saying like, who are the individuals that are ultimately going to be the profitable for the lifetime of our business? Meaning your sales team can close them fast. It's a higher velocity maybe type of sale. They're the type of customer that will stick with you. They'll continue to buy from you. And ultimately, a lot of us grow over a period of time through additional products and services. And who are these individuals that will continue to do that? And I think, and I'll go through a quick exercise of how I've done that, but as an example, when I joined Engagio, I noticed we just kind of marketed to a lot of different companies, and I saw one particular area of our business, there's a high level of churn. It was really small companies under 50. We just quit marketing to those folks. Now if they come inbound for us, I don't pass them through my ADR team. We just don't sell to them. Because at the end of the day, it's expensive for me to do that, and it doesn't really get the return that I want to see. That's one really, really simple example, but it's really interesting to go through your data and start to see, where do I see a lot of churn, or where am I seeing there's an issue in the business? And as a marketing team, I actually believe that's part of our jobs, and it'll really help with your credibility. Your sales team will, I feel like, really love you for it. It can make your job a little harder, because for me, that means like that's an area of the market I'm not selling to. It's harder for me now to get opportunities, but it's still better because it's better for our business. So it's really rethinking your mindset. It's not about more, it's about the right accounts. And I think if you're in B2B, this is a really, really critical thing to think about. And it's hard because a lot of us in marketing, we've kind of grown up, I know myself, the years at Marketo, it was a lot about volume, and it was almost like more the better. What's your number of MQLs? That's how you're measured. And I really, again, kind of a key message for today is just really rethink that mindset, because to me, it's like you can go to an event and again, get 20,000 leads, but if you really aren't converting those, is that winning? Like, it's not. That was expensive. It's almost like you're filling this bucket that's leaky. That doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of a point. So the ABM strategy that I want to talk about isn't new. I also want to highlight that. This is a strategy marketers have used forever, but I think demand generation has been trendy over the last few years. And think of it almost like a net, and you're actually catching fish. And you might be also catching boots and crabs and other weird things that really are irrelevant. But again, it makes you feel good. Now, account-based marketing is like the analogy of fishing with a spear, and you're being very thoughtful and proactive of who you're going after. So as an example, your ICP. Who are the customers that are best for your business? In some companies, this could be a particular vertical. You might say, wow, for us financial services, that's really where we do the best. So we're gonna focus there. Or companies of a certain size. There's a lot of ways you can look at your ICP, but I think it's really important to think that way. And again, just being proactive about who you are going after. Now, you could say, is this something that makes sense for my business? And I'll give you some examples where I think it does. So to me, in a lot of B2B deals, and again, I'm talking about that, let me give you an example first where it doesn't make sense. So say you have a widget you sell on Amazon and you've had wine on a Friday night, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that. That's not where ABM makes sense. That's a transactional shopping cart type of purchase. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you might have a buying center. So there's multiple people that participate in the buying process, and it might not be fast. For us, an average deal time can be 8 months to a year. So that's what I'm talking about. And so this is a strategy that really makes sense if that's your business. Again, if it's transactional and whimsical and someone's like, I'm gonna buy a drone and it's Saturday and that seems like a good idea, that's not what we're talking about. And again, another piece of this I think is really critical in a lot of the companies I've worked at. It's ultimately land and expand. So you get in an account, it's how do we continue to grow that? How do we make sure we're like really gleaning the most value out of that account as possible? And to me, ABM is important and really the right way to do that, because your sales team and your marketing team, they need to know this account. And so it's really important, again, to make sure that you're being focused and thoughtful there. But this is really where it makes a lot of sense. Any questions on that? Okay. So the other point that I made is ABM is not a new strategy. I came really from the sciences and the life sciences industry, and I used to sell software into like Pfizer and large companies in the pharmaceutical industry, and we used ABM. But the reason that I think it is better and interesting now are some of these points. To me, again, why now? The economics, it really drives higher quality deals. And I kind of want to talk about that because I see in a lot of cases, we'll talk to companies and they'll say, you know, ABM sounds great, why should I be doing it? And a lot of you might be in businesses where you start to see you're sort of not able to get the growth that you want to see. Like maybe you have a demand generation model and the goal you have this year is higher than the year before, and maybe somebody tells you your budget has actually been reduced. I don't know if anyone's had that happen to them. That's typically been my entire career. It's like, hey, guess what? You have to grow more this year and we're cutting your budget and we're giving it to Japan, or we're giving it to APAC or another region. And so that's a great time to also look at ABM. It's like maybe what you're doing isn't getting you where you need to be. So again, really being proactive about who you go after. And that's kind of my saturation point. Like you can kind of start with an inbound strategy, but you kind of can get to this point of diminishing returns. And I don't know if many of you have seen that. At my time at Marketo, I had an enterprise team where we did a lot of account-based marketing, but our SMB team was somewhat transactional. And I'd say about the 4th year I was there, we started to see ACVs start to decline. And the sales team's like, whew, it's getting rough out there. We can't hit our goals. So we did a scalable ABM model where we started to focus on key verticals. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody about that as well too. So there's different flavors of this, but it's great. But the reason that it's interesting to me now is that you can do this at scale. So you might be thinking, wow, that account-based marketing, you're being focused, you're being thoughtful, you work a lot with your sales team on accounts and getting into these accounts, but now there's technology that will help you do this in a scalable way, and that's kind of another piece I want to leave you with. It doesn't have to be sort of that manual process that you've done in the past. Because again, a lot of companies we talk to that are really at the enterprise level, they'll say, yeah, we've done ABM for years, we have 10 accounts that we focus on, but now we really want to get to hundreds of accounts where we use this strategy, and they can do that now because there's technologies that support that. And I'm happy to talk about it, but I also don't want to, get into I don't want to sell to anybody today. So now I'm going to go through some steps that I think, to me, again, this is meant to be practical and really simple. So if you're going to start doing this tomorrow, what do you do? So the first one I think is really, again, understanding who you want to sell to. And this is the example of what I did. This isn't real data, but it's very similar to what I did when I joined Engagio. So I really started to look at, here's our key segments. I want to look at churn, and I want to look at revenue churn rate. And this is one facet of what you can look at. So maybe it's a different thing that you're examining for your business. But I started to see, wow, enterprise, this looks like it's probably a better thing for us. And under 50, that churn rate is just high. And the reason for us is there's typically not a dedicated marketer who's going to run a product like ours. And we saw that with marketing automation as well. It's really hard to sell into a company. It's 10 people, and you're like, do you have a dedicated marketing person? And they're like, no, it's our CEO part-time. That isn't going to work. So that's okay, but that's not who we want to sell to. So it's really critical to look at that for your particular business. So kind of doing that analysis is a really good place to start. And once you sort of identify that, here's some other facets just to give you some ideas. Just look at your historical data. Everybody, even at a small company, you have 6 months worth of sales data a year. Do some analysis on that and start to look at patterns. Maybe it's a geography you're really successful with. There's a lot of different facets. We also will look at, to me, like revenue data is another one to look at. I will also, for us, we look at technology that they might own. Again, we do better if somebody is on Salesforce CRM and they have marketing automation in place. Those are signals for us we're going to be successful. If they don't, what that tells me is it's not maybe a sophisticated marketing team and we're not at the right time for them. We're a little too early. So then you want to figure out your TAM, your total addressable market, what's the white space. And the reason I say that is that's also an interesting exercise. You don't want to say, we're going to start selling to companies and there's 2, and they're only going to pay us 10 grand each. That's bad. You don't want that. So it's okay if it's like it's 10 companies, they're going to pay you, several $1 million each. So also that's another kind of aspect that you want to look at. And then lastly, prioritizing these accounts. And this is one piece that I do have strong opinions on. A lot of times in companies, you'll see my sales team picked all the accounts we're going to go after. And typically salespeople are going to pick their accounts. It's great. It's good that they do that, but it's based on relationships they have. Your head of sales might say, oh yeah, I know Mark over there. We're going to sell to this account. It's our best account. And my approach was really to go about using some, there's a lot of great predictive technologies and other ways to look at this. You can start to prioritize all your accounts. Do that first from a marketing perspective to see this is where this company should have a high propensity to buy from us. And again, we looked at different facets, company size, revenue. We looked at where they were based from a geography standpoint and their tech stack. That's really critical for our business. And then what I did is I met with our sales leader, and he basically looked through the list and was like, okay, a lot of these are good, nope, and then he crossed out some others. So my point is, it should be a joint process that marketing and sales work on together. It shouldn't be something sales goes and does in a vacuum, but also it shouldn't be something that marketing does and throws over the wall, because your sales team will never accept it, in my experience. They'll say, oh, you know, that marketing list, we're not going to use that. And the whole point is to really get their buy-in. So that's really kind of how I think about looking at target accounts. And then this is a question I get asked a lot too. So maybe you have been doing a demand gen strategy and it's like, okay, great. Now we're going to move to this new model. How do I think about it? And this is highly simplified, but it'll illustrate the point. So what I'm showing is your revenue goals. So I start every year, what is my pipeline goal that I'm trying to hit? What's the revenue of the company? In general, you should know the amount of pipeline you're trying to create to hit that revenue goal and how that is sourced. So as an example, I know that I might have to have a 5X on revenue. I need 5X pipeline to hit my goals in general. I know part of that's coming from sales and part of that's coming from our internal sales team and then marketing. Then what I do is I might look at my segments and then apply my strategy. So this is, again, similar to what I did at Marketo. Maybe for our small medium business segment where it's higher velocity, I might say, okay, I might have a bit of a more of a demand gen strategy there, ABM hybrid model, and then for our enterprise segment, pure ABM model. So I'm looking at that. And then here's kind of how that maps. Because for a lot of companies, what they'll say is, you know, aspects of demand gen, you're not going to stop doing. You're not going to turn off pay-per-click, probably. You're not going to turn off all your digital advertising. So how do you figure out what that looks like? So to me, this is kind of a nice way to really think about, for key segments, what strategy and what model are you going to apply? It's one way to do it. Now, I also think it's pretty important, and this is kind of just true in marketing in general. I'm amazed at how many people, when you kind of ask them, they can't really tell you always what their goal is of what they're trying to do. They're like, well, I'm trying to grow. So that's great, but really, like, go a step further. What is it you're really, really trying to get to? And so to me, with ABM, I like having a hypothesis, or even if you're doing a demand gen model, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get to a higher ASP? Are you trying to get into a set of accounts that are meaningful for your business? Some of us just have logos we want to get, right? Hey, we all want Google to be a customer, as an example, and so you want that logo. You might not care about necessarily what they spend with you. Or I've worked with enterprises and they're like, look, we have our key accounts, but we need our team selling this new product, help them sell that product. So I think it's really good to say, look, this is the goal that I have in mind for this initiative. And again, being very explicit about that, this is what this would look like. So what I do is I come up with a scorecard and I'll say, look, this is year one. In our target accounts, we're going to create 80% engagement, 30% sales appointments in our tier one. We're going to see 40% of our pipeline from enterprise accounts. We're going to see a 45% increase in op size, and then our win rate is 50% in target accounts. And you might say, well, how do you know that? And the answer is you don't. You take an educated guess based on data, and you might evolve this over time. But the point that I like to highlight, even if you're not using account-based marketing, putting a model together like this, it puts a stake in the ground. And it gives your team something that you're moving towards and striving towards. And otherwise, you don't really know, like, are you doing a good job or are you not doing a good job? So I have a model like this, and then I report on this at the board, and I'll show for our target accounts how well we're doing against something like this. And again, this is an example, but for me, I'm amazed at how many companies don't do something like this. Like, their marketing team can't tell you, here's our plan of record, this is the goal, this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're going to get there. So again, that's a really important discipline, I believe, for any marketer. So once you now have thought about, okay, my ICP and my goal, let's look at our buyer segments. And this is something that, again, many of you have probably seen something like this before, but we're going to make it fun. So again, identifying key personas. You could say, oh God, personas, not again. To me, this is sort of like brushing your teeth, but not everyone brushes their teeth. So again, I feel like you'll go into companies and you're like, so who are you selling to? Oh yeah, like all marketers. Well, that's not really a persona, and that's not really a segment. So this is one of those things that I think people know they should do, but they don't do it. I'll also highlight, I don't think you need 15 personas. We've all been at companies where it's like, hey, like we have 60 personas. Okay, that didn't work out then. That's a bad exercise. And to me, you can make it simple. You can have 3. Who's your exec sponsor, who's the user, and who's the decision maker? Basically, you can do it that way, or maybe if you're in a real technical space, you might see, well, this is the core developer, and really understanding what that person cares about. Because another key aspect of marketing I believe in strongly, it's not really about the tactics, it's about the message and what you tell people. So I'm not a big believer in like, oh, it's social media, or it's digital, or it's direct mail. I don't really care. It's probably a combination of those things. It's more what you're saying through those vehicles. So I think really understanding who you sell to is very critical. And then defining a journey. And again, we all hear about this, define the buyer's journey. And you're like, oh God, what does that really mean? This is a simple example of a way you can do it that I think works. So you might have your personas, you've got one, and you'll notice I have the stage goal, and that's really from a business perspective. So are they aware of you? Are they considering some product like this? What do they, what can I do to get them to purchase, adopt, etc.? But what you'll see here is I have a buyer goal, and that's really from the buyer's perspective. So you can see I have a business perspective and then a buyer's perspective. And then this is a great thing to do. What content do I have? Again, don't think about the vehicles at this point. Like, is it email? Is it direct mail? Is it, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Think about what you have to say in different formats. And this is a simple matrix you can put together that, again, I find if you really ask people, okay, I'm selling to an IT buyer, great, what do you have? And people are like, I've got this one white paper. It's like, okay, cool, but that's gonna be good for one particular question that person's asking. It's not maybe the best for when they're just kind of trying to be aware of different products or services. Then I think it's critical to do some segmentation. This is an example of when you're marketing to your customer base. And again, like for me, I actually have a number. I'm compensated like a salesperson. So I have a pipeline number, and then I think about upsell, cross-sell, and retention. Highly recommend doing that. I find that most marketers don't have a number. I think you should. And it really helps you align with sales, and it puts real skin in the game. So to me, my head of sales always knows, I think a lot about making sure that we're always really doing well on our numbers, because again, that's how I'm paid, and I like money because I like to do stuff. So again, segmenting your customer base, this is different ways to think about it. Don't just market to customers just like hey, it's a customer segment. Think about it. Are they a target account? What's their health? Are they a red account? Are they a green account? What's the size of the org? I'm not going to market to an Autodesk the way I am to a New Relic. They're just different, right? And also the industry. Hopefully these are helpful. I think you get the slides, which then you can just, hopefully people just scrape this stuff. Just don't reinvent the wheel. I feel like, the work's done, take it. This is where, again, for those of you that have multiple products, thinking about for those personas, what products make sense. Typically, you don't have one customer that wants all your products or services, even though it's easy to do that and send an email, hey, buy everything. I've never really seen that work. So again, like all the discipline that you have up front, make sure you continue that through. That's the key point of this slide, but just being thoughtful about that. Now I'm going to talk about program design, and it's kind of, this is simple, and then we'll end on some metrics and best practices. At this point, does anyone have any questions? Is this making sense to people? Is it interesting? Hopefully. Okay, cool. So now designing programs. This is a key thing, I think, with account-based marketing that I think makes a lot of sense. Hopefully this is a build. Not all your target accounts are the same. So you have some that are strategic, and you typically only have a few of those. And those are the accounts that I think of like it's the white glove treatment. Those are the companies that everyone at your company, your CEO might know a lot about. They are the best of the best, the ones you care about. So as an example, that could mean that's Comcast for some people, that's Google for some people. These are the ones where you're like, I'm really proud to put that logo up on that slide, and all effort goes into those. Style 2, these might be in the 50 to 1,000 range, so not 5 to 50. And these, again, they're going to be important, but it's more scalable. And then down to style 3, that's going to be programmatic. And the takeaway here is, again, not all target accounts are the same, because I notice sometimes people will go through an exercise and they'll say, okay, I have 5,000 target accounts, now I'm stressed out, because it seems too much to actually work on. And that's why I want to highlight this model. They're not all the same, don't treat them all the same. And in theory, you'll notice that investment and ROI go up. So those style 1 top accounts, those should be your big money makers, or it should be an account that's so critical for you to just have as a customer. Again, from a logo perspective, you're going to put the effort in. And so you could say, all right, what do I do with that? Hopefully the clicker goes. This is another one of these slides. I feel like everyone should scrape this. I don't see enough people doing this kind of thing. Your different tiers will get different levels of investment and time and programs. And what I like to do with this slide is, you'll notice on the left I have types of programs. Then I have by tiers what different accounts get. And what's cool about an exercise like this is, say over here you have your types of programs, and this could be direct mail, field events, targeted ads. You can do really cool targeted ads to different accounts. There's great technologies that help you do that. Appointment setting, data build out. You might be going after an account, you don't have all the data. What I do with this list is I will put everything that I can think of. And a lot of times you'll meet with your sales team and they'll say like, wow, have you guys ever thought of doing X? And you're like, of course we have. And so what's nice is you can put everything there, and maybe what you do is you gray it out if you don't have the budget or people to support it, but at least they can say, at least they can see you've thought of it. And I like that, because in a lot of cases, like many meetings are spent talking about, oh, you know what we just need? We need this awesome webinar series. You're like, wow, never thought of it, but I don't have a team of 10 to go do it. So I like having that list there. And then what I'm doing is saying tier 1, basically, you'll see it's pretty much a yes the whole way down. Tier 2, some things, but as we get to tier 3, it's a lot more scaling the good stuff that we have, because again, these accounts aren't as valuable. Now what's cool about this, everyone has had this happen where you're at your desk, and a rep calls you or comes up and is like, hey, I have this account in Florida, and I really think that the CEO should come out and do this exec dinner. And you're like, okay, Mark, but that's a tier 3. So we agreed that that's not what we're gonna do for a tier 3 account. So what this does, it's expectation setting. That's all it is. And it's making sure you and your sales team agree or on the same page, and your marketing team stays with you and they don't quit because they're burned out and sad, because that happens. Because marketing teams have a lot to do. And I think what I like about this, it's kind of saying, for the team we have, for the budget we have, here's what's possible and what makes sense. And to me, this has been, I think, a real game changer. I'm now implementing this for our customers as well too, so our tier 1s continue to get a lot of great programs. So this kind of highlights my last point, is that really what can you realistically support? I think all of us have built marketing plans, and you look at it and you're kind of like, this looks good. Like, I'm excited about this. But inside you're like, I don't know that I can pull this off. I mean, maybe that hasn't happened. It's happened to me, because marketers have a lot of great ideas, and everyone in the beginning of the year is like, we're caffeinated. This is awesome. Great idea. Of course we're going to do this video series. And then you're like, how am I actually going to execute that? So what I like about this matrix, it's just keeping it real. That's what we're doing. And I don't know, I found that works really well. Now, on the program side, if you remember one thing today, this is kind of my personal pet peeve, random acts of kindness are good, we love that, but random acts of marketing are bad, just bad. And all of us have seen this, right? Where you're kind of like in a meeting and someone's like, you know what we need? We need to really do this partner video, because that's going to solve our problems. And again, this is kind of a takeaway, just don't do that. Don't operate that way as a marketer, because you're going to get tired and sad and just not feel good. It's just bad. I think it's really important to go, what is the goal? What am I here to try to do for this particular objective? If it's cross-sell, that company might know you, so how do you highlight you have something new and special for them? Maybe you have a set of accounts, they have no idea who your company is. A lot of people in here, I think, are at startups, and you might not have the crazy brand awareness that you need for a lot of companies. So look at and understand, what's the objective you're trying to hit? Is it awareness? Is it engagement? Is it action? Figure that out before you start doing stuff. Because a lot of marketing teams are just like, I'm just going in and I'm doing it all. I'm gonna set up all this digital, and you're like, why? Like, that might not even make sense. I'm like, less is more. If you can do it, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't get in that mindset of like, I talked to somebody the other day and it made me just sad. It was a woman at a great company here in the Bay Area, and she's like, just tell me what you guys are doing that's cool. She's like, I just want to know the cool and the latest and greatest. I'm like, why? Like, that's not the right question. What's working? Do more of what's working. And because you might get sick of it, doesn't mean the market's sick of it. So we've all done things where we're like, okay, I'm sort of over that like explainer video. I've seen it 30,000 times, but your buyer hasn't. So don't make yourself crazy. You look at what works for your business and continue to do that and understand what you need to do. That's really critical. So this is kind of one way you can do this. I've done this different ways. But one of the first things I do, this is actually our product. You don't have to do it this way. So I just want to highlight that. I've done this in Excel as well. But I look at my accounts and I first start to say, where do I have coverage? So you can see, here's some of the companies we market to here. You can see SurveyMonkey, Autodesk, Google. Do I have a CXO, VP, director, manager? And if I'm going after a C-level and I don't have any people there, what do I need to do? That's a different question, right? Versus, wow, I have great coverage there. Now I can start to do a different marketing program. So one of the first things I tell marketing teams, have a budget for data. Because if you're going after key accounts, you want to make sure you can actually help your sales team have people there they can talk to, right? Or you can market to. So that's a lot of our job, is kind of building out that white space. And first understand, do you have the coverage? You might be at a company where that looks great and you've got everyone you need, or you might see, wow, we really don't even have people. I've done it where I've been at companies and the decision is like, now we're going to move up market and go to the enterprise. And you look at those companies, you're like, we don't have any of the right people. It's all, marketing managers, but we need to get to that CMO level. So that's a good question. Then I also look at this, and it's really who, at our target accounts, do we have awareness or not? There's a lot of great technologies and tools where you can start to see this. So for accounts that you care about, you can actually see, are they engaging in your marketing programs? And this is a combination for us. We look at web traffic and all the different marketing programs we run. So it isn't just web traffic. But then, so there's certain companies I market to, they're really aware of us. So am I going to run ads to them? No, that doesn't make any sense. But there might be some other issue that we're having on the sales side where they can't quite get into that account and move a deal forward. So all I'm trying to highlight is, think of it as almost like you're a scientist, like diagnose the problem before you throw the kitchen sink at it. Because you might not be running the right tactics, and it's expensive. Not all of us have crazy budgets and big teams to do things with, so you want to be thoughtful there. I also have this slide because I feel like content's a big topic. And I think that you can't go on Twitter without somebody saying like, oh, have great content. It's like, yeah, just be more interesting, just be more attractive. Sure, it's so easy. So it's not. So I really kind of want to point to this. I like this because it's basically saying, for my style 1 accounts, I want to have content that's 100% personalized. And what that means is, maybe you have a video and you actually include the company's name. You're doing this for 5 or 10 accounts, right? Or you have an ebook and you put their logo on it and you write a nice kind of intro section. I've done this and it works really well. They're like, wow, this was created just for me. But you can see as you move this way, you're not going to be as personalized and targeted. You can't. It won't scale. But at least think about, if you're trying to get into maybe it's a set of 10 accounts, what can you do that's just going to delight that buyer? And seeing their logo on it, or having an intro that describes, we understand your pains, that's pretty cool. And one way to do that, you might say, well, I don't really know what the pains are of the company. Listen to, look at their annual reports, or when they have their quarterly earnings calls. That's an awesome tip. You can actually, they'll say what their issues are on those calls. So all of those are recorded at a lot of the larger companies if you're marketing to those, and you can start to see that's the challenge they're really faced with. I think it works really well. So another concept I'll put out there is the idea of a play, and this is something that we do in account-based marketing. I think it's really nice because, again, you could sort of say, wow, that's kind of gimmicky sounding, and all I'm trying to say is it's a marketing and sales initiated effort. It's not just marketing kind of off in a room saying that's the right thing, or sales kind of going and doing their own thing, because that doesn't always work so well either, but it's having a concerted effort. So one of the things that we've looked at a lot and pioneered, which I think is cool, is really, here's an example, and I'll show 2. This one is really, I want to get into a new account. They don't know who we are at all. So one of the things we might start to do, I'll look at all our accounts, and I can see, I did it this week. Here's accounts that are not aware of us, meaning it just looks blank. We don't see any engagement. So we might send them, do some targeted ads. So there's different platforms where you can make sure you're doing advertising that's just hitting those accounts. It's not completely accurate. I think everyone who knows digital advertising knows that's not true, even though they'll tell you it is, it's not. And then we will do a direct mail package. We've tried a lot of different ideas. We've done Tiffany boxes. If you take a meeting, then you ultimately will get something. We've done trips, you name it. We've tried some really cool things. If anyone wants ideas there, I think we've had some pretty cool success. We've done umbrellas when it was raining in the Bay Area. So all local companies got these cool Engagio umbrellas, and people are like, wow, this is useful and interesting. We always will send content with it, though. We never just will send something that's gimmicky without an aspect of value. Then we'll set up an email from our head of sales and basically additional steps. Our product enables you to do these steps. Even say you're not doing that, think about kind of your process in general. I've seen a lot of companies almost take like a flow, like if you're using Visio or some way to articulate like, okay, marketing's gonna do these things, but then what happens? So I have our internal sales team. I don't know how many people have internal sales teams reporting to them. I recommend it because then you can make sure what you wanna have happen. I think when I've seen those folks report into sales, you don't always kind of know the direction that they're getting. And you as a marketer don't want to put in all this effort and then see nothing. You want to make sure the follow through is happening. That's really, really important. And you can also start to diagnose where they're having issues, right? So it's like, hey, like, I don't know how many people have done this. If you have an internal sales team, SDRs, ADRs, they're called different things, and you look at their views and you look at what they're trying to do every day, that's a good exercise. And if you haven't, I highly recommend it because you'll start to see, wow, here's all these people they're sorting through. How do they know who to call? Make sure that that's a process that's easy for them. But what I like about doing this is it's clear. It's a great way to articulate also to senior folks what you're doing, which I think is good. And then we actually will measure those steps so you can see what's most important. But that you can do that other ways as well too. Let's see, this is another one that I like, and this is, I feel like, a cool idea. Many of us in B2B, we will be working on a deal, and you'll notice that you will get it to a certain point and you might see it stall out. So I don't know how many people have data set up in a way you can start to see areas of your process where it's like, ooh, bad things, right? You can get, we have something called a stage 0 opportunity, which means it's the right person, they have budget, it's not the right time. And what we see is like there's kind of a stall process. So we've created this idea of it's called deal nurture. And it's like, what can we do for those? Like, what can we do to shorten that, like really kind of shrink that velocity. And that's something I think is really critical as a marketer. If you can do that, that's really, really helpful for your sales team. So we'll meet on those, we'll go through them, and we'll say, what can we do? One that we did this week, it was a company we had talked to, they had good engagement, it dropped, and they're local in the Bay Area, so we sent them cupcakes with their logo on it, and we're just like, hey, we want to make sure your ABM efforts are sweet. Hey, it might not be the best, but that's what we did. Anyway, what happened is we got a response. And we hadn't heard from them, but what we were able to do is get a response, and now we have a meeting on the books. So it's kind of like sometimes accounts need to be waken up, and you kind of need to, they get busy. You can think about your day and how, like even at this event right now, you're probably thinking, whoa, my email, who knows what's going on? So it's important. Don't always think it's a bad thing. Sometimes people just kind of need that extra push. And so there's really neat things that you can do there. But I think having data where you can look at that's important. Just on the customer marketing side, we talked about this a little bit. I think my clicker's dying out here a little bit. But I think that, again, I really am a huge believer in customer marketing. I think it's going to be something we'll see a lot more. I feel like it's been a very acquisition-based kind of marketing environment for the last 5 to 6 years. And what I think with customers, like really kind of once you bring people in, you do the onboarding, a lot of marketing teams just then aren't involved, right? And you're like, great, we have customers. But I think when you start to see the communications and what happens, I would really encourage you as a marketer to be involved in that process because your customers are your most valuable asset that you can have. And again, ABM I think helps this. That's why I have it in this section. But what I notice is it's almost like once you're married, like you actually have to try harder. It's more work, right? And I think when acquisition's fun because it's like we're dating. It's like, hey, do you like Chinese food? I do. Great, let's do that. But I think once you're married, it's like, whoa, how do we keep it spicy? That's customer marketing. You gotta keep it spicy. You've got to remind them why they're with you, why they want to stay. And so you have to be personal and relevant. Don't get lazy here. And I see a lot of companies, they're like, our churn isn't that good, our churn is bad. But then you kind of see like the customer experience and what happens. You're like, well, no wonder. It's like no one's talked to them, no one's touched them. You've only asked them for more money and haven't given them anything of value. And again, there's a lot of technologies that will help you do this at scale and be personal. So I'm not recommending that you like personalize every email yourself, but there's ways to do that are cool. And we definitely see, we try a lot of this. This is one example for an enterprise executive breakfast where we did a personalized text-based email. We always see this. We get a really good response from this. And there's 2 tips I'll tell you. If you're trying to reach execs in your business, make sure any communication comes from an equal level person. That's a really important thing. A CEO or a CMO or a CIO, they're not going to open an email from Billy, the marketing coordinator. They're just not. It's not going to happen. So if you need them at something, maybe it's an advisory board, maybe it's an event, maybe it's, hey, we're going to showcase this new product, think about those invitations or communications coming from an equally senior level person. And when we do the personalization, we see a big boost on that versus just an HTML. Another key point that I want to highlight, and this is just good marketing, it's not, account-based marketing makes this easier, but I have a big belief in really working with the sales team and helping them act. Like, don't just meet with your sales team and say, hey, we're running these campaigns, it's so exciting. Your sales team doesn't care. They really don't. Make sure that they have the right information to do their job. And one of the key things that we'll do is we'll actually show them, here, say you run the West, you're AVP of the West. We'll show you the accounts that have engagement, those that don't, key people, and then the top performing marketing programs. And again, like, there's different ways to do that, but think about your interactions with your sales team and how are you helping them? Like, prioritize their time, making sure they're successful, getting the meetings they want. Don't just talk to them about like, oh, we have this new content asset that came out. They probably don't care. There's this webinar we're doing on storytelling. We actually have that this week. I told my team, don't tell the sales team, because they really don't care, and it doesn't mean anything to them. But I think giving them information that's like, hey, if I were you, we have something called a stand-up, and I have marketing people paired with reps, and we'll basically go through that. Here are accounts that we see a lot of additional engagement. You might want to follow up with Sarah, or you might want to follow up with Karen, and they find that valuable. So we do a 10-minute stand-up in our kitchen. And again, if you have a smaller company, that's a good thing to try. Lastly, I'm going to end on measurement and optimization, because I think this is a really critical area for a lot of us. Whoops, sorry about that. So ABM metrics, the thing that I think is hard, this is kind of why I see a lot of marketers struggle with it. Again, you're reporting on success in accounts, not necessarily MQLs. So it's not necessarily a big volume metric, and a lot of companies struggle with that. So if you report that to the board, or you might have a CEO or a CMO that you report to and say, hey, this is our MQL number, or I don't know how everyone reports here, that's a big shift for people, because they're so used to like, big is good, volume is good. And so you have to change that a little bit. And hopefully I feel like everybody in here also can have the conversation. It's not about credit, it's not about marketing doing something or sales. Most things both groups touch. So if you also remember one thing, don't get into that conversation. It's not a good one, because you don't ever want marketing to say, well, we are the ones that sourced that deal, or does anyone have that, or is everyone pretty cool with their sales team? I'm sure everyone in here has amazing relationships with sales. Yeah, mine is perfect too, so sure. But I think the key thing here is I do see teams, actually a company I was just at last week, I mean, they almost live in fear of justifying their existence with programs. They're like, oh, I just need to show this return, and where we try not to live like that. Marketing is really valuable, and so sales. And with one of the cool things with Engagio, you can actually look at the engagement created by both teams. It's equal. I mean, you just see like sales reaching out, meetings, marketing things working here and there. It's never just one. And if you think like it's super important to say, oh, it's a marketing source deal, that's just not the right conversation. For you, it's important to know where your investments make sense. Like for me, I look at it as almost like an investment banker. I want to know, is my digital getting me a better return? Is my content syndication, like what is working? But that's different than credit. So make sure that that's something that you think a lot about, because language and how you talk to other people, it makes a big difference. And if sales feels like, hey, marketing's trying to take credit here, it just creates the wrong dynamic. And I'm sure no one has that issue. One of the other things that we like to look at is, instead of marketing qualified leads, is marketing qualified accounts. And one way to do this, and I've done a hacky thing, do many people in here have marketing automation? Yes, no, some people do. So if you're using any sort of scoring model, what typically I feel like marketers have done is they'll say, here's the right person, and they've done the right thing, right? And so that will give you a big lead score if people are kind of familiar with that language. So, hey, I'm a VP of marketing, I've been on the pricing page, I'm an MQL. And what I, in my time at Marketo, saw didn't work with that is you might say, okay, here's a VP or a senior level person was on the pricing page, but they work at a pet store in Minnesota. They're not buying Marketo, right? And so that's where we got into the bad talk track with sales, because they're like, these MQLs, they're terrible, we can't close them. So all I'm encouraging you to do here is think about it being the right person, right activity, add an account you can sell to, and have some way of looking at that data. And again, technology can help you do this, but even if you're in a position where you're like, okay, I'm not gonna go buy software today, like think about a way to look at that so you have the right lens. So that way you're passing things over to your sales team they can actually close, and it's not like, yay, like here's the right title, they did all this great stuff, but it's just like, it's some like consulting firm, that's never gonna do anything. You don't want that. So I think this is a good model to look at. Serious Decisions also talks a lot about this, for those of you that know that. This is another kind of thing just to think about, and I don't necessarily think this is only for account-based marketing, but metrics and measurement. To me, all of us probably are responsible for revenue and pipeline, and we'd all agree to that, but I also feel like sometimes we've almost swung so far where people are like, oh, it's not about Facebook likes or anything like that. Like those are terrible vanity metrics, and I'm sort of a believer it's just the right question at the right stage. Because I think if you're in B2B, you're not gonna get that close one deal like after the event. Like, so we do things all the time and I'm like, I don't know, like I need some way to look at that. So I think it's really important to look at engagement. You can start to look at how many accounts, do a cohort analysis, are progressing to those next stages. So I look at, I might have a group that's in an aware stage. How many of those accounts am I progressing to that next stage? That's a great metric to be able to report on. And then ultimately you can start to look at, great, here's the pipeline we created, revenue won, and which programs are working. I'm assuming everyone in here sort of gets this last one. But again, in B2B, you're not gonna know that for a long time. So what are you looking at in the meantime to say these initiatives are working or not? And I think as marketers, that's important. We all do things where you have this campaign. We had this direct mail campaign. We thought it was great and it was terrible. I mean, it just didn't work. And so I was like, okay, so we bought a lot of popcorn, we had to get rid of it. That's a problem, but I don't wanna keep using it for my customers. It was get your ABM popping. It didn't work. But anyway, I'm just being honest. It doesn't always work. So, but you don't want to keep doing it. So tip 1 is measure at different points in time. So I always like to say, here are some early stage metrics to look at. So if you don't have a way to look at awareness or engagement or web traffic, maybe it's the number of meetings you're creating in those accounts. Before you get to some of these other things, report on both. Because to me, it's really critical to course correct. If you see something going down a path of badness, like our popcorn thing, you want to make sure to not continue to do that. Let's see. This is another thing I like to do, is take a baseline. So when I joined Engagio and we started doing a lot of work on our target accounts, I took a baseline with our key accounts, kind of where they were at first, and then I want to be able to show that progression over time. And I'll give an example. This is actually from one of our customers. This is version 1. And so kind of what they did here, you can see they kicked this off a while ago, 2015. Basically, they looked at engagement prior to their initiative and then post. So this is a great thing to be able to show if you're a marketer. Again, kind of look at all the influence and everything that we're doing, kind of, and kind of what that shift looks like. Again, this is important before you have those pipeline and revenue numbers. Because again, folks will say, wow, you spent a lot on digital this month and you did these big events, like how's that working? And it feels bad when you can't come back and say, oh yeah, we closed 10 deals from Dreamforce. It just doesn't work like that. For us, we'll go, as an example, to Dreamforce. It might take us 10 months before we see that. And it's always good, but it takes time. And then this is an example. I actually show something like this at our board meetings, where I show our high-level metrics and then I show our tiers of accounts, and really kind of how we're progressing them, and kind of some of the conversion rates, the ops, the ACVs. So it's basically saying, look, our efforts are going through these accounts. We see bigger deal sizes. We see just better overall goodness, and that's why we're doing it. And we can show kind of like what that's looking like. Our conversion rates are better, all that type of stuff. So this is a good thing to do. So with that, I'm going to get to some closing thoughts. Again, maybe you're doing demand generation today and it seems kind of like, wow, this is a big shift, because it can be. And for those of you that, when you started doing demand generation, that could have felt a little bit tricky too. So I always think, start with a pilot. You don't have to boil the ocean. You can do this. Like when I was at Marketo, we just said, okay, we're going to focus on these accounts and financial services. This was for our small, medium business team. And you know what we did? We got our messaging really, really good. We thought about what those people cared about. And we did a webinar, and I think we did 2 emails. It wasn't crazy. But what we did see, this is embarrassing, but I'll tell you, on the webinar, we typically would see, I don't know, we had webinars with 5,000 people. I think we had one that had 8. So we were used to big numbers, right? This particular webinar, I think, had 20 people, and everyone's like, wow, that was a fail. Like, my sales team was like, bad. But we ended up getting 4 deals from it, so the conversion rate was, that's what I'm telling you, the numbers, you have to look at it different. But the deals and what we got out of it were much, much better. But what I want to tell you is, like, don't be afraid to try things, even if it's like, oh, you can't go through all these steps. Like, if you look online, there's all this stuff around ABM, it's like the 20-step process. It's like, no one's doing that. Like, just get in and try to do some small things because it can really help your business. And again, you can kind of read some of these key points, but a lot of times folks are like worried about budget too. And so I might look at some of our poor performing programs, move budget over to try something new. If you can, always try to keep a little bit of budget to do some testing and try new things. Because I think even in marketing, what you'll see is something that worked in the first part of the year, it's like, it doesn't always stay like that. We wish it did. But sometimes you have to make sure you're trying new things. So you can be clever about how you do this. So just don't get in the mindset of like, it has to be perfect. Just try. Because I think I see a lot of companies and it's like, they just never get initiatives off the ground, especially if you're a larger company, because it's just, they get stuck in their own decision making and it's not a good process. Let's see. So people, this is another thing I get asked about. I don't have dedicated headcount. Most people don't. I've never worked somewhere it's like, I'm going to try that. You get a new person. Like I'm typically, I wish that was the case. So you can sort of look at your existing staff over here and where they'll play a role in ABM. So product marketing, often I've seen those folks really help you with your ICP analysis. They love that kind of project. They're really good at it if you have a product marketing team. I don't know how big folks' companies are in here, so I don't want to talk like everyone's got 20 people teams. My current team, to give you kind of a data point, is about 6. And then I have our internal sales team, which is another, maybe 7 or 8 people. So I have a small team. I've been in smaller teams. I've been in much bigger teams at Marketo. But the idea here is you can be scrappy and leverage folks that you already have to get some of this done. And I think that over time, if it's working for you, pilot, then you might have a dedicated person. And I know some folks, some have demand centers. I don't know if anyone in here kind of runs that or has that at their organization. It's kind of like a hub that does all the marketing programs. You can start to move to a model like that. And then lastly, I'll just start with end with this checklist. I think this is cool. It's kind of like know why you're doing ABM. Again, I believe you're doing ABM because you see something you're doing right now isn't getting you where you need to be. And again, I'm not saying don't do demand gen. I do it too. But I think kind of identifying some areas of the business where it's just putting in effort where you're going to see a better return. Position it internally as a strategic initiative. I think if you're like, hey, marketing came up with this thing, not everyone's going to have the same level of buy-in. So, don't position it as like, it's the next big marketing campaign. I think it's critical to work with sales on this process. Like, sales has to be your partner and be pretty close in this whole type of process. And I think that that's a benefit that comes out of it. As you work closely with your sales team, you get their input. And I feel like it gives you a lot of credibility when you're like working with them day in and day out, because they get it. They're not like, oh, marketing's over there making hats and t-shirts. It's like, no, we don't do that. I also agree, I told you earlier, don't dictate to sales the accounts to go after. You might go through your analysis process, but then get their feedback, because they might say, hey, I know that company, they're in a 3-year agreement, they're not going to be able to buy from us. And then again, results can take time. So I think kind of looking at those early stage engagement metrics or meetings, something else until you can get to the pipeline is important. And then, we just have the takeaways here. Whoops. In case you're tired or haven't had enough coffee, this is what I talked about. So again, I think to me what I love about ABM is it's creating quality growth. You're thoughtful about who you're bringing in from the beginning. So we go after accounts. That's not to say I don't get inbound leads and people coming in, but we have a pretty strict kind of band, and they have to fit within that or I don't pass them through. And that was kind of a scary thing because I knew it would make it harder for me to hit my number. But I do see, like after months of doing that, the quality is really, really good. So that's an exciting thing. I think it's good for the entire journey because you know those accounts, you focus on them, and then you do better customer marketing. And again, we didn't talk about it in detail, but I think being personal and relevant is really important. And then again, it's not about volume. So that's like the hardest shift for a lot of companies because again, you're not saying it's 20,000 MQLs, but you're saying, look, the ops we got, their quality, and we're going to close them in less time and make more money. And that's, I think, what everybody wants. So that's what I have. Thank you. Anyone have questions?
How does GDPR affect any of this?
How does GDPR affect? Well, I'll tell you two things. So we just went through that, and the number one thing that I would say is, well, it just in general takes up a lot of your team's time. So I feel like it just across the board, it's something that's consumed a lot of my team's time, and then I feel like it's taken us away from other things. But as far as privacy, so you might mean
impacting the data you can collect.
Yeah, so the way that we're doing it as an example, because a lot of classic ways of doing ABM, you might purchase a list or purchase names and you just start marketing to them. We are being a little bit more careful about that process. And really trying to be as compliant as possible with GDPR regulations. And so there's certain types of opt-ins. On our forms, we're stating things like, right now, because of our size, we're not doing tons internationally. I used to do a lot of marketing to Germany when I was at Marketo. It's always been double opt-in. So I like to, and again, every company has to decide this for themselves, kind of how much they want to follow GDPR to the T versus in the spirit of GDPR. And so for us, I feel like we definitely have gone through and updated all our forms. We use Marketo, so we've got everything updated there. And it was a big initiative. I mean, it's kind of in marketing, these things happen. And I think the biggest thing I've seen is like, it's not something that we've been able as a marketing team to say like, yay, we're now GDPR compliant. Like no one cares other than us, which is sad because it took time. But it affects it in the sense that I think you should be a little more cautious with outreach. And just like a lot of companies have their ADRs just spamming everybody, like I'm just gonna blast them with email. I personally would not do that. I'd be careful about it.
Hi. For teaching the class. You mentioned the successful campaign about the umbrellas that you handed out. I was wondering if you could give another example.
Yeah, so let's see, what's another example of what we've done recently? We did AirPods over the holidays because again, like our number kind of did a hockey stick like it usually does. Like you're kind of like, oh wow, and this month's higher, great. So we needed to really make sure our ADRs could get the number of meetings we were trying to hit. So the way I think of it, I do just sort of the work back model. For us, we have a goal of getting about 18 meetings a week to get our op number for that, just in that time period. And so it was kind of an exciting way for them to say, hey, and if you are interested in ABM, you do want to talk to us, we're also right now doing this. So it's not to say, I don't want somebody taking a meeting just for the thing, but it kind of expedites it, right? It's like, oh, cool, I do want that because it's the holidays. So that was something cool that we did as well too. So we've tried a lot of different things. We were recently at Serious Decisions and we had a lot of accounts we were going after back east and we sent them beach towels and like all these cool things because it was in Vegas and we're like, come join us. And sometimes I know those things sound gimmicky, but people like it. I'll tell you one thing that didn't work that came to me. We were sent a big boat, probably this big. I'm not gonna say who it was from, but that's all we got. And so it's like, take a meeting and you'll get the remote control, but I didn't know why. Like they didn't tell me any reason why I should talk to them, why me, why now. And so we all looked at the boat, we're like, okay, it's kind of neat. People put some stuff on it for a while and then it went in the trash. So you don't want to do that, right? Even though it's kind of like, wow, it's this big boat. Or I saw somebody sent out like Darth Vader masks and did something around that and people are like, I don't get why. So everything we do, we will also send, here's the CMO's guide to getting started with ABM, or here's why we think you could benefit. You always want to kind of answer why you, why now with any kind of campaign like that.
Yeah, I'm curious about TAM and how every company has only a certain number of sales reps. How big or small do you want your TAM to be based on the size of your sales reps?
Right. To me, I would answer that with it really depends on your product or service. So some of us in the room probably have a very specific product or service we offer that's a really high price point. And to me, it's almost like a chart, like the higher value, higher price point, it's really super targeted and you might sell it. There's a company I deal with and their deals are in the neighborhood of $8 million. So their TAM doesn't need to be big, right? They could sell that and do maybe, I don't know, a few deals a year and that's fine. And that's what they do, right? So you can think of like nuclear reactors as one kind of extreme example of that. But as you move your product or service down and the price point and sort of the the specialty of it goes down, your TAM should probably be bigger. And that's kind of where, to me, more of a demand gen transactional model works, because it's cheaper, right? So you don't need as many people involved. You don't need buy-in. Like I said, you could be drinking wine on Friday and you're like, oh yeah, I need a laser pointer. It's fun, right? That your TAM needs to be really, really big. Nuclear reactor, smaller. So that's how I look at it. It's hyper dependent on your product.
So you mentioned early on about the less than 50, size companies, and just kind of not pushing those through the marketing funnel. So how do you do that without creating kind of bad word of mouth, right? I think I agree with it. I've had customers call.
It's a good
like,
question.
Hey, we've been asking for info.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because it's tough. Like, you never want to turn somebody away. I had somebody reach out to me personally and say, I really want to buy your product, but we're not on Salesforce CRM. How can you help me? And the way we've kind of trained folks to answer is like, thank you, we totally appreciate your interest. We just can't support you at this time. And we feel it's better to be honest and upfront now and kind of save everybody the time. It's almost like dating. It's like, this isn't gonna work. Like, it's okay, right? Like, I'd rather tell that to somebody versus like months of dating and then just goes bad, right? So it's just, I feel like kind of being honest and upfront. And sometimes we'll try to give them something of value to, like, hey, but here's some really great tips or things that you could look at in the meantime. We've tried to kind of soften it with giving them like content assets. And sometimes people just get a little bit upset. Like, wow, that's kind of frustrating. You don't sell to us right now. But it's like, we just don't. So to me, we just kind of address it with honesty, and I'm not going to tell you we never get people that are frustrated. We do. It's like, hey, we are on some, they typically are on some like tiny CRM, or it's like, hey, we hacked together this thing, and it's like, can't help you right now. We're just not at that place. So we're just honest.
So I work for a company, I've been there 4.5 years. We started with SDRs under sales, then we put them under marketing, and now they're going back under sales. How do you... So the big issues that we had, there's a few. First of all, they wanted to be salespeople, not marketers.
Right.
So we had a high churn when we moved them under marketing because they didn't want to report to marketing. How do you address areas like that?
Yeah.
And how do you keep the other thing that we found is they might communicate some things that worked well for leads that when I got on the phone as a rep didn't actually work so well.
Interesting.
So the messaging was not as marketing as it should have been.
Yeah. So the way I've approached it is we keep the sales path, and we're very, very clear about that. We're like, hey, you report under marketing, but sales is your partner. Like, the formal reporting structure's into me, but I still have them have a lot of face time with my sales leader as well, and we've been very clear. You join this company, and ours, we give different paths. Some of them actually want to go into customer success. They kind of do the role for a while, and they're like, oh, I don't really want to be a salesperson. It's kind of like people always think they want to do something until they do the job, and they're like, maybe not. But we've been very explicit that we support that path. So if they're successful, they do a great job, we'll put them into a sales role or another role. So I think as long as we do that, and then I do give them FaceTime with the sales team. It's like it's not all of a sudden, hey, you're sequestered over here. If anything, I've tried to bring the groups more together. And right now, we went from like a kind of a inbound, outbound model. Now I have them doing all bound and partnering with that sales partner so they own a territory. And I'm finding that's working really well too, because they're talking more together. Whereas in the past, like, I felt like, you're right, there's certain things they might not be spot on with messaging, or they might not know. My big thing I find is they don't always feel like they know definitions well. Like, what is an op? Like, we only have it documented in 50 places, but that's cool. So it's like, the thing I'm realizing is like, you have to over communicate. Like, it's just that group in general, sales and ADRs, it's like, it's all about over communication. But again, making sure that they have the path they want and not keeping them away from sales. It's like, they still go to sales meetings and do all of that. Yeah.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but let's offer one more round of applause for